Okay, my English teacher friends. So today I want to delve into one of the many ways I have to or to alternatively grade an essay. So we're all familiar with the typical traditional way of grading papers. Student submits the paper, we sit on it for as long as we possibly can because we dread the evenings and the weekends that it's going to take to get through a whole class stack. And what we ultimately do is sit down and cram as many comments as possible into the margins with this blind faith that students are going to grow and mature as writers by virtue of the comments that we give them. And I asked myself early in my career, why are we doing this to ourselves? It does not work. Not only does it eat our evenings and our weekends, but it just doesn't enable our students to flourish as writers. And we've been doing this since the one room schoolhouse. So being me and being that type of guy who says, if it's broke, I'm going to fix it, I began to think about ways to have alternatives to that one paradigm of grading because it seems like that's the only thing that exists. And it's not. So I teach high school and at the university level. And I remember trucking through the snow in upstate New York to go to a university library to do as much research as I could on alternative grading methods. And mind you, this was like year one of my teaching career, so 20 years ago. And there was virtually nothing written about alternatives to traditional grading methods. So I was kind of stuck and I had to think outside of the box and come up with some alternatives on my own. So at this stage of my career, what I would like to do is share a few of those methods with my fellow teacher friends. And today I'm going to show you one of the 40 that I have invented. And soon I plan on publishing a book and a video series on this. I just have to get through some other texts that I'm working on, but I would say fall, spring of next year that should be out. I just got to sit down and flesh things out. So this one's called 190, 80, 70 Roulette. And what I do is I find a stack of papers. Well, let me back up. So I assign a paper and then students submit it. I read them, and what I do is I set aside a paper that I would give 100, a 90, and an 80 to. And what I'm going to do is write the 70 so as not to embarrass anyone. So I'll go over the setup and the procedures. So I read each draft, and on the notepad, I write down the grade I think the student earned on that paper. I don't give them any comments at all. I'm just tracking grades. So as I just said, from the stack, I'm going to grab 100, a 90, and an 80, and the teacher writes the 70. So we just like kind of scheme up in our minds all the snafus and all the pitfalls, all the glitches that are struggling and emerging writers commit in their thinking on paper, and we make them manifest. Like I tend to do it hyperbolically in my 70. So the papers that are submitted to the writing workshop are anonymous. I don't reveal the students' names at all. If the student wants to reveal their presence during the writing workshop, they're uh, you know, more than able to do that, and oftentimes they do. They come forward and say, yes, but what I was trying to do, or yes, what I thought we needed to do was. And it's really cool when they take ownership of it. So what I do is I don't tell the students which one's the 100, which one's the 90, the 80, the 70, but we evaluate each aspect of my writing template. And for those of you that are familiar with my work, we break down the declarative and inverted thesis, and then every single like minute thing of the syllogistic method, and then into nuance. So we look at like to be verbs, tier 2 level vocabulary, the sentence constructs for voice, rhythm, and flow, all of those things. And I'll get into that more clearly in just a second. So what students do is compare the 4 papers. And what we're going to do in just a second is take a look at 4 introductions, and I'll model for you how we proceed through the writing workshop with those 4 models. So ultimately, students are going to compare their draft, appraise, and assess each element of the template to what we're going over at that particular time. So, for example, I could say, all right, underline every tier 2 level word you have in your paper. Look at the vocabulary of the 100, the 90, the 80, the 70. Where does your vocabulary, where does your academic diction compare to the 100, 90, 80, 70? And they can pretty much ascertain where they stand grade-wise with regards to that. You can do a buddy system. Oftentimes students, it's like looking in the mirror too closely at yourself and not being able to identify things. Oftentimes with our emerging writers, they can't really identify what's going on in their writing. So it's a good idea to have them pass their paper to a buddy and have the buddy and the writer of that essay dissect it. So here's what we do. So I have on my notepad written the grade I think the student earned. And at the end of the writing workshop, I have the students do this. In exactly 5 sentences, I have them write down a justification for the grade they think they deserve. But the big thing is, why? Why do you feel that way? And I tell them, you can't say effort, that you worked hard. I'm not grading your effort. I'm never grading your effort. So when it comes to composition. So 5 sentences exactly detailing why you think you have earned that particular grade. And then the big thing is, give yourself 3 learning targets. What's 3 things that you're going to work on the next subsequent draft or next essay that you work on? And I tell them this to keep them true and honest. If we are within a 5-point margin, so let's say a kid gives themselves an 88 and I say it's a 91, I'll give them the 91. They'll get the higher grade. But we need to be within a 5-point margin of error. So to give you a sense, because I know some of you might be, your skeptical antennae might have just, elevated on top of your heads, like, ooh, my kids won't honor that. They're going to grade inflate or something to that nature. So I have currently 79 11 Regents students. So Regents in New York State is general ed. And I had 2 grade discrepancies. I had one student give himself a 98 and I said 81. So clearly we're off. And that's an easy conversation to sit down with the kid and say, come on, be honest. And then I had one kid go the opposite direction. I said 85 and they said 50. Right. So it's just, a kid that's beating himself up a little bit too much and being disingenuous and kind of self-deprecating as a writer. So I just pulled them aside during a class when we had some downtime and we went over the paper and broke it down a little bit more critically with my eye on it. So great time saver. So let me show you how this works. So the big thing that I tell teachers when we work together during my professional development series or when they take my mastermind class is that you got to Bob Ross your instruction. And here's what I mean by that. So let's imagine Bob Ross comes onto the screen and he says, all right, happy little people, today we're going to paint a beautiful New England autumnal landscape with beautiful fall foliage. And in the center of our canvas, we're going to include a New England wood-covered bridge. Like, he doesn't pass out graphic organizers. He doesn't talk into the ether about the elements, the technique, and the theory of painting. He proceeds to get at that canvas at his easel, and he walks us through the exact process of painting through that particular piece. And I tell teachers this all the time. You have to position yourself as the expert writer in the classroom. And with this exercise, you're kind of painting, a Bob Ross blunder, for your kids because you're writing the 70. So you're kind of doing something that Bob Ross wouldn't do, but you're still providing models and exemplars, which is really crucial. So I'm a big contender that the more writing students see, the better they're going to become. They need to see a lot of writing. So in this case, in this writing workshop, they're seeing 4 essays. So I'm going to transition now as if we're in my classroom. This is exactly what my students would see during this writing workshop. So I'm going to show you an essay that I did with my 11 region students. It's a synthesis essay whereby we focused on SpongeBob SquarePants. As of today, I've not put this in my YouTube channel, but I will next week after I record it and get some more student samples. So here's the prompt. So for synthesis, early elemental synthesis, I wanted the thesis to say yes, no, or maybe it depends to an essential question. So here's how this works. Does SpongeBob SquarePants have any pedagogical merit for its intended age demographic? And we had a great Socratic seminar about this. Students were very passionate about their beliefs because some of them are still SpongeBob junkies and, literally could detail every episode because they've watched it so many times. So we broke down what this means because there's heavy vocab in it. I want it to be as academic as possible. And in other words, it's saying, does SpongeBob have any educational value for kids age 5 to 12, which is the age demographic of the show? So from there, I gave them 3 articles. One said yes, one said no, one says it depends, so that I wouldn't sway them in any particular direction. Then they needed to find 3 articles on their own to help them defend, qualify, challenge, and refute their thesis. I also wanted them to offer a concession, so they ended up getting something from the opposition, the opposing viewpoint, which they could have used one of my 3 articles for that. So that's how I set up the essay. So in the writing workshop, I just asked them the question, how do I write the introductory paragraph? Mind you, I Bob Ross the heck out of this before they wrote. I'm the expert writer, and I said to them in the first writing workshop, before they even started writing the essay, there's 2 ways to write an introduction. You can declare or invert. And I defined it for them. I said, if you declare, your very first sentence in the introductory paragraph is going to answer the essential question. Does SpongeBob SquarePants have any educational value for the intended age demographic? So boom, right out of the gate, answer the question. That's the easiest thing to do. So I said to my students, if you're struggling, this is the easiest way to begin because you just have to ensure that you have a thesis. That's half the battle. So answer the question as declaratively as possible. From there, you provide context and background. I like to see tier 2 level vocabulary, which is just your average run-of-the-mill SAT level word, and then sentence constructs. In my other videos, there are 2 in particular in my YouTube channel where I go over how to teach your students the various sentence constructs. I use the Strunk and White paradigm from their book called Write It Right. And in that book, they assert that there's 12 different ways to construct a sentence. And you'll see that most of my better 11th graders can manipulate those 12 sentence constructs, and it helps them to achieve voice, rhythm, and flow. So the other voice aspect is that academic diction in the tier 2. And the kicker, because we're using a template, is this. Each introductory paragraph is 4 sentences long. So I want exactly 4 sentences, unless you feel like you're a good writer, a good competent writer who can make some deliberate choices and justify your choices, explain your choices intelligently, then you can kick the training wheels off and go freebird on this, which a couple of my students did. So if you invert the thesis, you're just going to flip it up on top of its head. You're going to start with the context and background, possibly a hook or an analogy, and then you're still shooting the same tier 2 sentence constructs. But the kicker is this: you end by answering the essential question. So within this template, it guarantees that the student has a thesis statement if they answer the essential question. And so what I did during my first writing workshop, I said, here's 2 declarative introductions that I wrote. Here's 2 inverted theses that I wrote. On your mark, get set, go, write your introduction. And just modeling it for, the declarative twice and the inverted twice. I did not have a single student look at their blank screen, because we have Chromebooks. Nobody was looking at their blank screen saying, I don't know what to do. I was explicit as possible, and they knew exactly what to do. And that's the beauty of Bob Rossing your instruction. It just totally demystifies the process for your students. So in the second writing workshop, where we're doing 190, 80, 70 roulette, I would show them this. Start with the introduction, and we would talk about everything that I just detailed in terms of what goes in an introduction. So they don't know if this is the 100, the 90, the 80, or the 70. We look at all 4, and then we backtrack and deconstruct. So let me read this to you. Continually watching SpongeBob SquarePants impairs a child's ability to focus, learn, and mature. So I'm assuming this is going to be an inverted thesis because they have not answered the question. So let's skip to the last sentence and make sure. Additionally, the show is completely non-educational. Boom, they answered it. So this is going to be inverted. So let me take it from the top, and we'll take a look at the sentence constructs, the tier 2, the voice, rhythm, and flow. And then we'll try to put this on our scale of 190, 80, 70 roulette. Continually watching SpongeBob SquarePants impairs a child's ability to focus, learn, and mature. So students often say, how do you start with context and background? I said, it's like poker, man, but show your cards. So show your reader exactly which direction you're going. And we know how the student is going to answer the essential question, but they have not answered the essential question yet. That's context and background. The inappropriate jokes in SpongeBob expose young children to words, innuendos, and visuals they should not see or hear at such a young age. From a cognitive and social level, the show does not meet the learning needs of the intended age demographic and is inappropriate pedagogically, socially, and behaviorally. Additionally, the show is completely non-educational. It even decreases the attention spans and problem-solving abilities of children. So the last sentence is the thesis, super articulate there, right? Very clearly defined thesis statement. So I'll tell you, I'll just reveal my score to you. This is the 100, right? Take a look at these sentence constructs here. The last sentence in particular. Additionally, comma, the show is completely non-educational, hyphen, right? So my students know how to wield sentences like that. At least they've been taught. Not all can. So there's great voice, rhythm, and flow. There's none of that choppy, short, simple declarative sentence, that students stack that sentence construct one on top of each other. There's also great tier 2 in here. Just things like impair, innuendo, cognitive, pedagogical, great words like that I really like to see. So you don't want to overdo it and sound like a goon. You gotta stay in your wheelhouse. And this kid owns those words. So we know sometimes when students stretch their vocab, they get way out of their wheelhouse. They invent words, they misfire words, and they just don't sound natural. They get a little pretentious and kind of copping too much of a tone. So that's what I would say to these kids, in terms of breaking this down. But I want them to do the talking during the writing workshop. So we look at this and I say, tell me the good, the bad, the ugly. What are you seeing in here? And oftentimes I have my students in quads, in seats, groups of 4, and I say huddle up and as a group talk to each other about the good, the bad, the ugly, and they can articulate that. They know, because I've Bob Ross so much during the academic year, what they're looking at. So then we go to this. And I wrote this one, but they don't know it. This is the 70. Look at the difference here. The show SpongeBob has been diligent entertainment for kids for almost 60 years. SpongeBob can introduce new learning tactics and basic human decency to kids. It is an educational show for kids regardless of the comedy. So I say, all right, guys, in your groups of 4, huddle up, tell me the good, the bad, the ugly. And they will identify this is only 3 sentences. That first sentence is complete waste of space. So the SpongeBob has been diligent entertainment. They talk about the diction there, but also, I didn't capitalize SpongeBob. And also I have misinformation. The show has not been on the air for 60 years. Right, and we know that sometimes our kids do this. Also note the sentence constructs. Each one parallels the next. Short, simple, declarative, short, simple, declarative, short, simple, declarative. So my students would pick up on that. Big lack of tier 2 level vocabulary. And I don't reveal the scores until we look at all 4, but they're probably saying to themselves, this is the 70, the first one's the 100. It's kind of like when we calibrate at, when we do the AP exam, or some of you guys have state exams and you have calibration processes. So that's what we're doing here. And the other thing is, the kid did not answer the essential question. The kid, I wrote this. So I don't have a thesis statement here. So then we go to the next one. SpongeBob SquarePants teaches young children such things as morals, the value of having a strong work ethic, and the overall merits of simply being a good person. The show and its characters have a positive influence on today's youth. They encourage the values of hard work, amiability, and determination. These are values that we want at the foundational core of every child. And then right here, it looks like another inverted. They have to answer the question. Unquestionably, the animation is a perfect show for the appropriate age demographic. So again, they huddle up, good, bad, ugly. Let's have a discussion about it. And my role is to stay out of that discussion as much as possible. I want them to figure out the traits of good writing, right? They have to be able to articulate it. And if they articulate it, then maybe they can execute it on their paper. So, of course, some kids just don't have the vocab and they're going to struggle with the sentence constructs. But every kid, no matter who it is in your classroom, can get anchored in a thesis statement. All they need to do is answer the essential question. So then we have this one. SpongeBob's endless positivity and work ethic could not provide children with a better show to watch. SpongeBob implants realistic means of achieving success into young viewers' minds and provides them with a solid moral foundation built for success. While SpongeBob is fast-paced and intense, there's no scientific evidence that a television program can elicit ADHD in a child. For our kids to learn valuable life lessons, this is one show parents can trust to advance their good parenting. So let's break this down together. One thing none of my students looked at this, so I had to bring it to their attention. Look at how the first sentence begins SpongeBob, and the second sentence begins SpongeBob, and the third sentence begins SpongeBob. So we don't want reiterative sentence openers. That leads to that da-da, 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 da-da kind of voice rhythm and flow. Choppy, 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 choppy. So we can't have that in our writing. So students then read their papers and say, did I do that? And they're like, I did that. So that's the thing in looking at 4 of these. They look at their paper and say, I did those snafus, right? So mine's probably looking like the 80 a little bit. I got to work on that. That's going to be one of my learning targets. So the vocab's not high in here. The sentence constructs aren't as good. It has all that parallelism with the sentence openers. And then here's where they really, really trap themselves, which this was a great conversation for students to have. Do you see how they talk about eliciting ADHD in a child? When we got to the rest of their essay, we backtracked to this introduction, and I said, "Uh-oh, they talked about ADHD in the thesis, but in the essay, in the body paragraphs, they never once talked about the show eliciting ADHD in a child." So it becomes a conversation of don't show your hand too much, right? So got to have a little bit of poker face in that introduction. You don't want to get into your textual support. You don't want to be talking about your sources. None of that stuff goes into the introduction. So then when we're done looking at all four, here's what we do. I say, you've seen 4 introductions. In the margin of your paper, in exactly 3 sentences, I want you to tell me why. Like, you begin the conversation, and then I'm going to respond to you. You begin the conversation in 3 sentences and tell me why your introduction looks like the 80, why your introduction looks like the 90. And then I tell them they can go in between. Like maybe they think they're at 85 or something of that nature. They can take ownership over their writing. We do not need to tell kids the good, the bad, the ugly of their writing. They can figure it out. So I had Theodore Sizer as my mentor teacher in graduate school, and he always told his students, if you're doing more work than your students, something's wrong there. And in traditional grading practices, think about this. We are doing 99.9% of the heavy lifting. What does the student have to do? Read our comments when we give the paper back, and we know more than half of them probably do not read it, and then look at the grade and say, yeah, awesome, or Mrs. Smith hates me. This is a personal grade. She hates me. Or I don't care, whatever, I got at least a 65. I'm going to pass, right? So the students literally do that in terms of the transaction. So in this 190, 80, 70 roulette, I would say they're doing 80% of the work. So then from here, if you're familiar with my template, from here, we got to take a look at the first premises. And the first premise, they have to get a why reason. So the thesis just says yes, no, maybe. So then we're going to take a look at all 4 first premises. You have to state why. Why are you stating yes? Why are you stating no? Why are you saying maybe? It depends. And again, the 80s and the 70s don't do a good job of doing that. The students can compare their work, and then in the margin, I say in exactly 3 sentences, tell me where you stand with regards to your first premise. And they can see that. And if they don't, then they have to do the buddy system in their quads. So there's always 4 kids that they're working with, and they can pass their computers around the quad and have a conversation about each element. We take a look at to be verbs, the vocab, the sentence constructs, the quote transitions, all of that stuff. So it's very thorough. So I'm on an 80-minute block system. So I see my kids every other day, and we can get through every essay in 80 minutes. So we usually finish up at 70 minutes, and then they write their 5-sentence appraisal, their grade appraisal, and then their learning targets. I then collect their work, and I have a conversation with them. They submit these in Google Classroom. We do everything on Chromebook. And I can agree, disagree with them. If they overlook something, I could add it in the comment. And then in the end, I say, I agree with your score. We're 3 points off. You get the higher grade. Holy time saver. But here's the kicker. Like, not only are you freeing up your evenings and your weekends, but your kids are actually learning a ton about writing. And that's the goal. That's how we get them to grow and mature. Traditional grading methods, that does not happen. So in the end here, here's what I'm going to say. For my textbook that I'm going to write, I want to present 40 of these alternatives to traditional grading. So that's what I have accumulated over my 20-year career. And then in February, I'm still putting the details together with Perfection Learning for this. But it's looking like probably the first Wednesday in February, I'll be doing a free webinar with Perfection Learning. I'll put notifications in the AP Lang, AP Lit, and National Writing Project groups, and then my own group, Teachers Making Better Writers. I don't know if all of you are members of that Facebook group, but I moderate that one. So it's called Teachers Making Better Writers. Come join us. There's a lot of good content in there. And I'll be doing professional development with the National Writing Project. So I just signed a contract with them, and we'll be doing like full trainings on these traditional grading methods. So join me. So it's all free, and that'll be coming in the forthcoming weeks and months, so you could look forward to that. If you have any questions or want to learn some more about this, you can email me at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. And I know usually when I reveal the alternative grading methods, I get like a barrage of emails like, give me more, give me more, give me more. And I'll just say, sit tight, attend the webinar at Perfection Learning, look into what the National Writing Project is going to be doing, because it's really hard to explain these things. I have to give a full demonstration like I just did, and I really can't do that through email unless I devote a lifetime to answering your emails. So hopefully you really like this, can use it in your classroom. It's a fantastic way to save yourselves a ton of time with your evenings and weekends. But man, oh man, do your kids learn a ton about writing doing this. So God bless for now. Happy writing, happy teaching.